So, maybe I should try. Sounds good. That was my plan B. Good evening, community. Good evening to those of you who are here in person, those of you who are online, those of you who are still buying your t-shirts in the lobby and are about to come in. We're so glad that you are here tonight to hear one of the most prophetic voices of our time. And to be a prophetic voice from Bethlehem, I have to say, 2,000 years ago, the bar was set really high, and so you're doing well. I bring you greetings from Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, where I am the pastor of Public Witness. And a shout out to the Lakeshore community who's been helping host tonight. By way of just situating yourself, we have bathrooms in the back corner here and on the side here. My apologies that our bathrooms have not yet been liberated, but we encourage you to use whatever one you need. Urinals in the back corner, stalls in both of them. By way of flow of program, there'll be a few brief remarks, and then we'll get to hear from Reverend Dr. Munther Issac. There will be a time of call to action, some ways in which you can get involved, and then there'll be a time of Q&A. So if you have questions as he's speaking, I believe there's a note card on the chair, so you can write them down, and the ushers will come and bring them to me during the call to action so we can be prepared for that. We won't be taking live questions, but please write yours down so that we can group like questions together and answer as many of them as possible. You might have seen on the way in that there are a variety of tabling materials. I hope that you will take some time not only to listen to the call to action, but look at materials and talk to folks. I want to give a shout out to some of the sponsoring organizations who will be providing ways to get involved. American Friends Service Committee, who works on the Apartheid-Free Communities Initiative. Let me just say that I'm also the national organizer for the Apartheid-Free Communities Initiative, so I would love to talk to you later about how your community can get involved. We have Friends of Wadi Fokin here. We have folks from Bay Area Divest. Friends of Sabile North America. And NorCal Sabile, the Northern California chapter of Friends of Sabile. Dr. Issac, I want to say just a few words since I have the microphone. First, I want to say that I've been able to worship in your church, and it is such an honor to have you here in mine. From this pulpit, I have quoted your words, and I have done my best to proclaim your message and the messages of Kairos Palestine. Some of you saw on the gate of the church a sign that says, "Love demands permanent ceasefire now." That sign was put up at this church on December 24th in direct response to Dr. Issac's call to make sure that Christmas was not celebrated as usual, acknowledging the great pain and devastation and the ways in which no Christian should be able to celebrate Christmas as usual this past year. It was one of now 28 houses of worship in the Bay Area that have those signs. If your community has a ceasefire banner up, please raise your hand. Thank you for your work. Unfortunately, the situation in this moment demands even more. And so thank you for coming so we can learn more about what's happening and how we can do even more. I'm going to invite up a representative of NorCal Sabeel to bring welcomes, and then we'll hear from Dr. Issac.
Good evening, all. Allies, supporters, friends, neighbors, Palestinian sisters and brothers, all Arab friends, all Christians, Muslims, all Jewish allies, and there's plenty of you. Everyone here watching online as well. We are one family. We are one family. Thank you for being here, and welcome all, ahlan wa sahlan. My name is Therese Mugannam, and I've been asked to speak briefly about an organization many of us here belong to and support called Friends of Sabeel North America, FOSNA, the acronym, which is an interdenominational Christian organization seeking justice and peace in the Holy Land through education, advocacy, and nonviolent action. FOSNA, Friends of Sabeel, North America, promotes the vision of Sabeel in Jerusalem, which is an ecumenical liberation theology movement founded by Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land and joining Friends of Sabeel chapters all around the world. As a nonprofit organization in the United States, we amplify the voice of Palestinians by advocating in churches, communities, and governments for justice, peace, and liberation in Palestine. Now, the Bay Area chapter, the NorCal Sabeel, which I belong to, is a small group of volunteers who came together after several of our members went to Palestine, beginning in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. Several trips have been made since then, and each time, for each person who participated, it was transformational, transformative experience. Since 2007, NorCal Sabeel, my group, members have put on several educational conferences all over the Bay Area, and we also did one in St. Paul, Minnesota, in St. Paul, Minneapolis, in Minnesota. Yeah. Okay. We are involved in direct actions such as demonstrations and boycotts, and we collaborate with other groups like Middle East Children's Alliance. Yeah. Okay. Jewish Voice for Peace, and the Arab Resource and Organizing Center. Yes. We have to work together. For those of you interested in checking us out, we have a lovely website that you can go to, just norcalsabeel.org. If you want to write that down, norcalsabeel.org. That'll get you there. We are on Facebook and other social media where you can find lots of resources and current information and suggestions for action in support of Palestine and Palestinians. Check us out and join us if you feel so inspired. We really need more active allies. And there is a sign-up sheet in the back of the church. If you feel so inclined, please do sign up. So, thank you. I also have the privilege and the honor of introducing our guest speaker tonight, who is Munther Issac, who is a Palestinian Christian pastor and theologian. He now pastors the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem and the Lutheran Church in Beit Sahur. Some of us have been in that, the Christmas Church in Bethlehem. How many of you have? Wow, look at that. That's fantastic. He's also the academic dean of Bethlehem Bible College and is the director of the highly acclaimed and influential Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. Yeah. During the genocide in Gaza, Munther gained global attention, I'm sure you're all aware of that, for his sermon, Christ Under the Rubble, which was heard by tens of millions of people and subsequently was quoted in South Africa's case against Israel and the International Court of Justice. He has appeared on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, CBS, TRT, and my favorite, Democracy Now! Munther is passionate about issues related to the Palestinian theology. He speaks locally and internationally and has published numerous articles on issues relating to the theology of the land, Palestinian Christians and Palestinian theology, holistic mission and reconciliation. Munther is the author of The Other Side of the Wall, From Land to Lands, From Eden to the Renewed Earth, An Introduction to Palestinian Theology in Arabic, a commentary on the Book of Daniel, also in Arabic, and more recently has published a book on women ordination in the church, also in Arabic. Yeah. He's also involved in many reconciliation and interfaith forums. He is a Kairos Palestine board member. Munther originally studied civil engineering in Birzeit University in Palestine. He then obtained a master's in biblical studies from Westminster Theological Seminary, and then a PhD from the Oxford Center for Mission Studies. We have a well-qualified person in our midst. Munther is married to Reneida, an architect, and together they have 2 boys. Karam, age 11, and Zaid, age 9, and I hope they're taking a little rest right now. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Munther Issac.
Thank you. Listen, thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. And I would like to begin by thanking you all for coming, and particularly thanking Friends of Sabil for putting this tour together. I am really grateful. Thank you for the Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, the family, Pastor Jim, Pastor Allison, and everyone involved in putting this event together. I'm really grateful for your support. I would like to begin by quoting probably my favorite passage in Scripture from Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for justice, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And I hope that we all, in our thirst and hunger for righteousness and our tireless efforts, that we will be satisfied. And I surely pray that those who are mourning in Gaza will one day soon be comforted. I'm grateful to be here, though I wish I was here in different circumstances. I wish I don't have to do this, to continue to advocate for a ceasefire 10 months after this genocide have started. It's so heartbreaking because it seems we're not just calling for a ceasefire, we're calling for the world to humanize the people of Gaza. And it's hard for us to think that this is still going on. The first time I came to the States after this war broke was in November, and our plan was to call for a ceasefire before Christmas. This was the intention. This was what we thought. Obviously, that didn't happen. And then friends of mine said, Munther, we need you to help us put together a program for Lent to call for a ceasefire. And this was in January. And I thought, surely by Lent, the war would have ended. So it's so hard for us to think and continue to call for the world, really to see the people of Gaza as equals. When will this madness stop? How many more need to die before the world decides enough is enough? How many more images do we need to share of children pulled from under the rubble? How many families need to die? And in fact, even as I was speaking yesterday in South California, while I was speaking, and the moment I finished, I looked at my phone. Yet another breaking news, 100 killed in a strike on a school while praying. Haven't the world seen enough? This is a genocide, and here is the difficult thing, in which both the victims and those committing it are broadcasting it live for the world to see. No one can claim we did not know or we did not see. Truth is evident for all to see, and it has become a matter of choice to ignore the reality. We live in a day in which a genocide is normalized, where we're watching it live, and we're getting used to it. And that's why, as people of conscience, as people of faith, we cannot stop protesting and speaking until this war is over. We should not stop talking about Gaza until because if we do stop, that means we accept to surrender to the reality that we can do nothing, that evil ultimately wins, that the killing of children in such horrific way is just part of life. So we cannot accept the normalization of such a horrific genocide. We must continue to speak about Gaza until this war is over. And so this is why I am here tonight. This is why I am here in the United States, to continue to talk, to call, to challenge, but also I'm here with a message to the American church and to the American people. And that message is first that this war did not begin on October 7th. How many times do we have to say it? Why is it that everyone continues, especially the media, to isolate October 7th as an isolated incident, as if everything began there? Why isn't anybody talking about the 76 years of oppression against the Palestinians? 76 years of ethnic cleansing and displacement of Palestinians. And I'm shocked that as I look at the Western media coverage of this war, how no one is talking about the fact that 80% of the people of Gaza are Nakba survivors. Don't you think that's an important component of the story? Displaced in 1948 and now displaced again. And people to continue to ignore their right. How long, how many more times do they need to be displaced until the world realizes that enough is enough? Until these people are able to live in dignity in their own homeland. Why isn't anybody talking about what happened in 1948? This is the root of all of it. In fact, I would even argue this began before 1948, when our land was described a land without people. Because what is really happening in Palestine is colonialism, settler colonialism to be precise. 800,000 Palestinians were forced out of Palestine, out of their homes, out of their towns when Israel was created. Israel was literally built on the ruins of the towns and villages of the people of Gaza. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Why isn't anybody talking about the systematic injustice that has been happening in Palestine year after year after year? Why is it that the international law seems to always be ignored when it comes to Palestine? I really want to go to the libraries and see the international law books and see if there is a footnote that says, with the exception of Palestinians. The same about human rights. Why doesn't it apply? I mean, we look at this war, hospitals have been destroyed, universities, mosques, churches, And it seems no one cares to apply human rights and the international law on the Palestinians. Why? And that's why I said in December, and I'll say it now, I never ever want to hear a European or an American lecture us on human rights or the international law again. Never. We are witnessing war crimes live on earth, and no one is doing a thing. Instead, it is being justified, rationalized. Even the strike yesterday, Israel claimed, well, it was a strike on a certain number of militants, and it's okay if 100 people died in the process. First of all, we can't really trust them because nothing they say is reliable. And then the sheer logic that they think and know that the world will accept this is the problem. Israel can claim we killed 1,000 civilians just to kill one militant, and they think that's okay because the world accepts this. It is racism at its worst. You know, the human shield argument. Have you heard the human shield argument? Well, if a serial killer escapes in Auckland and hides in a church, would you advocate the destruction and bombing of that church so that you killed, or that school so that you killed that serial killer? You would do it in one case, if he was hiding with animals, not with children. And maybe then human rights, actually animal rights, will protest. But somehow it's acceptable for Israel to continue to bomb civilians and justify it, and actually blame Palestinians for it. And the world just absorbs this and repeats it. Why isn't anybody talking about the reality of apartheid in Palestine? We need to talk about apartheid. And in fact, I am really shocked that no one takes those reports that call Israel an apartheid state seriously. And again, it makes us wonder, does the international law not apply on Palestinians? Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem and Yesh Din. Of course, before all of that, Palestinian human rights organization said it was apartheid, showed that it was apartheid. Of course, because of prejudice, no one takes us seriously. But then the international community spoke. Many UN reports said it's apartheid. And I wonder, why isn't the church talking about apartheid? Why? We really need to ask this question. Because for years you told us about the international law and human rights, and then when you have proof that Israel is committing apartheid, and apartheid is a serious crime. And it's so hard for us as Palestinians to see a war criminal and someone who's committing apartheid in Palestine be celebrated in the Congress as a hero. I'm grateful for those who boycotted, but this is the reality today. Where were the faith leaders to protest the leader of an apartheid state speaking in the Congress? Why is this all ignored? The whole world stopped what happened because of what happened on October 7th. Everyone talks about the hostages, saving the hostages. And I hope you all agree with me. I want all the hostages released. I hope we all agree. And that kidnapping children is wrong, is evil, we should condemn it. Kidnapping families is wrong, we should condemn it. Yet our question is, why is the world silenced that since October 7th, 9,000 Palestinians have been kidnapped? 9,000. No one did a thing. Tortured, struggle from famine, starvation, raped, it's well documented now. Without trial, without charges. I haven't seen the Palestinian flag on the Eiffel Tower. I haven't seen countries waging war on Israel to rescue these Palestinians kidnapped. And of course, here is the power of empire at display. You call them terrorists and you say we arrest them and everything is okay. You can do whatever to them by labeling Palestinians as terrorists. This is the power of empire at display. And it makes us wonder as Palestinians, really, are we less human? When our children are being kidnapped, hundreds of children every year are arrested without trial, without charges, administrative detention. And again, the world is okay. They just let it happen under watch. That's why we're angry. Why isn't anybody talking about the root causes of all of this? Does the international law matter, as we continue to ask? We were told Israel has the right to defend itself. Actually, some church statements would say Israel has the sacred right to defend itself. And then we as Palestinians ask, well, do we have the right to defend ourselves, our land, our dignity? We were in our land when Israel was created. It was our land that was stolen. Yet somehow, when we defend ourselves, we're called terrorists. And please help me understand, how is the colonizer defending itself from the colonized? And again, the fact that it was churches that repeat, it's not just governments, it was churches that repeated that rationale. This is what shocks me. Because you immediately ignored everything that happened from 1948 onward. And all of a sudden, Israel is the victim, defending itself, and Palestinians are the attackers, as if we initiated all of this. And please understand, I am 100% committed to nonviolent active resistance, nonviolent creative resistance. I don't believe in violence. Nevertheless, we have to ask the question, do Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? Or is it only the Israelis who have the right to? So this double standards is really shocking. This hypocrisy is really shocking. And maybe one of the most ways in which, or the times when this hypocrisy was so much revealed, was when the ICJ, the International Court of Justice ruling was, when it was delivered, and it was said that it's very plausible that Israel is committing genocide and that it must do all that it can to stop these actions. It was after deliberations and a well-written report by the South African, well-articulated case with evidence. And by the way, what did the Americans say about that case? They said it's meritless, in a very condescending manner, looking at the South African case and say without merit. And then the deliberation came. What happened after the ICJ? Nothing. And within a day or two, believe me, within a day or two, Israel made allegations that 12 UNRWA members took part on October 7th, and 12 countries immediately suspended their funding to UNRWA, led by the United States. I mean, what hypocrisy. This hypocrisy is appalling, and the amount of racism behind it is even more appalling. So we need to call it for what it is. So this is my message. You cannot continue to ignore the context and what led us to this moment. I can still talk about the siege, the dehumanizing siege of the people of Gaza for 16 years before October 7th, a siege that calculated the amounts of calories that entered Gaza. Have you heard me? The amount of calories were calculated that entered Gaza. Many times when, I was pressed in questions by whether church leaders or by journalists about October 7th, I say, I want you to live not 16 years under that siege, 16 months or even 16 weeks, and then I want to see how you will react before condemning and dehumanizing the people of Gaza. My second point is that the American church is complicit, and we have to say it. For 76 years, theology played a role, and even before that, my good friend, Palestinian theologian Yusuf Khoury said, this genocide started with the phrase, a land without people. This is when we were erased. And let me tell you something. We think of a land without people, that infamous slogan, as something related to Zionism, but it was actually Christian Zionists who said it first. Christians said it first. In a typical colonial mindset, they looked at our land and saw it empty. To them, the Palestinians were not people of equal worth. So they began planning their vision of bringing Jews to Palestine. They call it the restoration of the Jews. They thought that the restoration of the Jews, for that to happen, Jews must be gathered in Palestine. And by the way, the restoration of the Jews, let's call it for what? Conversions of Jews to Christianity. This is what they wanted. They couldn't live with the Jews among them because of anti-Semitism and racism. Their solution was, let's send them to Palestine and there the Messiah will come and they will convert. Now, of course, they gave it fancy theological terms, right? Restoration of Israel to their land. How many times we as Palestinians had to endure from churches listening over and over that Jews returned to their land. Jews return to their land, making me the Palestinian as a stranger in my land. Me, the Palestinian, the indigenous. And please understand, when we say this is our land as Palestinians, we're not making political statements. We're talking about land we've inherited and fought for generation upon generation upon generation. We're not making politics here. We're talking about land that we are so much rooted in. And all of a sudden we're told Jews are returning to their land, so it's not our land, as if we are now the ones who are occupying that land. And we have to endure this, knowing too well that the consequences of a phrase like this, Jews return to their land, means in actuality that a Jewish person born in Auckland or San Francisco can move to Palestine, have more rights, dispossess me of my land, kick me out of my land, and it's God's plan. It's fulfillment of prophecy. It's the faithfulness of God, we were told. Theology is part of it. For 76 years, colonialism needed a theology, what Palestinian theologian Mitri Rahib called the software of empire. Software. And I hope you try to understand how Palestinians perceive these things. And I've been asking people, are you listening to yourselves when you say things like Jews return to their land or God gave the land to the Jewish people? Are you really listening to yourself, imposing your theological and religious beliefs on millions of people? And you know, in a context in which everyone goes crazy about religious freedom, and everyone wants to tell us everyone is free to believe whatever they want, you want to impose a certain belief that God gave the land to the Jewish people on all Palestinians. And somehow we're supposed to accept this. Somehow we're simply supposed to accept that because, you know, God gave the land to a certain person 4,000 years ago, the descendants of that person today should have more political rights than we are. So I ask, are you really listening to yourselves when you use the Bible in this context? Or when you ask me, and how many times I've been asked by Christians in this country, Pastor, doesn't the Bible say? Friends, show me one other context in which the reference point to a dispute is a religious text rather than the international law or even human rights. Show me any other context in which when we solve a dispute, rather than yielding to the law or the international law, we go to a religious text. And the sad irony is that in Palestine, human rights are abused using the very same religious texts that were supposed to protect our human rights. And really, I keep asking, are you listening to yourself? Because if I have a debate with someone and we disagree on something, and your part of the argument is, well, God gave it to me, what can I say? Seriously. Or if your side of the argument, this is what God says. That's it. Can I say no? Honestly, I keep asking, are you listening to yourselves when you use the Bible to justify what's happening in Palestine today? And sadly, for years, theology played a role, not just in colonialism, but in promoting apartheid in Palestine and elsewhere, and now a genocide. I wish I could go with you on how church statements and theologians and pastors supported, justified, endorsed this genocide. I'm talking about this particular genocide in Gaza. And again, people want to ask me, but Pastor, doesn't the Bible say? Doesn't the Bible say this, or doesn't the Bible say that? And it's here what I want to say. Please listen to yourself before you ask me these questions. Because in reality, you're asking me, doesn't the Bible say that God is racist? This is what Christian Zionism is, that God is racist. That God is a tribal God of supremacy. Even worse, that God is a colonial God who does not mind about ethnically cleansing people to give room for someone else. This is what you're telling us. And then you're asking me, doesn't the Bible say? No, the Bible doesn't say that. It's the antithesis of what the Bible says about the God who was incarnated in Jesus, the embodiment of compassion and love and justice and mercy. There's nothing in the Bible about a God who favors a certain ethnicity or nationality or DNA. People ask me this question, DNA and who are the descendants. God doesn't care about your DNA or my DNA. DNA has nothing to do with what's happening in Palestine. Please stop asking these questions about Abraham and Ishmael. It has nothing to do with what is happening. God is not a God of colonialism, and genocide. You know, a pastor who's now a congressman, who studied in prestigious evangelical seminary. I'm not joking, 2 prestigious evangelical seminaries. In a discussion, maybe you've heard it said, he suggested that we should get it over with quickly in Gaza and do what we've done in Japan with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is a pastor. I couldn't believe it. And the idea that Hiroshima and Nagasaki are mentioned as good examples is what shocks me. I mean, what's wrong with America? Everything is solved by bombs and wars? Seriously? When will we learn as humanity? And then to suggest doing this to people in Gaza, where is Jesus in this, I ask as a pastor? Is something seriously wrong? And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, to be honest. Because this country knows something or two about the Bible being weaponized to justify settler colonialism. And I've come to realize that maybe this is the problem, that this country hasn't really dealt honestly, with integrity, with its own past. In the same way you haven't done with racism, because the racism that we are witnessing now towards us as Arabs, as Muslims and Palestinians is really shocking. Haven't the Bible been used to justify segregation, slavery, and in South Africa, apartheid? I was in South Africa in May, and I've learned at the feet of our siblings there, amazing leaders, theologians of integrity and courage. I spoke in churches and seminaries, and I would go to a church and they told me, this is the pulpit from which the first sermon on apartheid was preached. And then I went to a seminary and they said, this is the seminary in which apartheid theology was written. And I couldn't help but think, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude apartheid? Seriously, how? In the same way, we as Palestinians ask, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude Christian Zionism? And maybe the reason lies behind, someone once said, in the beginning, God created us in his own image, and since then we've been returning the favor. And I think we're reflecting our own prejudice and supremacy on the nature of God. And this is the tragedy of what's happening in Palestine. Christian Zionism needs to be called out as a theology of power, as a theology of empire. Yet in the same time, I really want you to understand that it's not just the fundamentalist Christian Zionists that we have a problem with. If anything, this war has taught us is that we really also have a problem with many in the mainline progressive, even liberal churches. As I said, we've heard that this is a war of self-defense. And we ask, how many times you've visited us? You know the context, and you still say this? We've been told this is a just war. I've read articles using the just war theory to justify this war. And as a friend of mine said, this makes the killing of 16,000 children the justice of God. I cannot accept that. This is not the Jesus way. And yet when it comes to many churches here, they spoke so loud in their silence. Their silence was so loud. And in essence, what they communicated is an image of God who does not care. So if the Christian Zionist God is a God of tribal war and violence, many in the mainline Protestant and other traditions showed us a God who does not care. Through the apathy and silence, wanting to avoid controversy, not wanting to get into something controversial. That's why I said silence is complicity. Silence as a reflection of our apathy, regardless of the reason. And recently I've been challenged by a story in scripture, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. We all know it. Story about the rich man and Lazarus, and ultimately it talks about one going to heaven, one going to hell, and what happens between them. And for years, I read this story and always thought, what's the sin of the rich man? Is it his money? Is it his richness? Certainly that doesn't have to be the case. Until I paid attention to a small, important little detail in that story, that says that Lazarus lied at the gate of the rich man. Meaning that the rich man would see Lazarus every day going in and going out. Which means that his sin was apathy. He did not care. Apathy. He did not care. It's really an indictment against our indifference, our apathy about so much, especially religious people who preach about justice and compassion, yet not care about the needs of people just at our doorsteps. And in the case of Gaza, we're being silent about a genocide that's being broadcasted live to our mobiles, to our TVs, and we say nothing. Silence is complicity. And sadly, many have chosen comfort, as I said, to avoid controversy. They wanted, I heard this morning something about the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, who said many preferred order for justice. And in the same way today, many just avoid to talk about Palestine because it's controversial. I thank God Jesus wasn't like this. I mean, was Jesus controversial? Jesus was, everything he said and did. I mean, imagine if Jesus walked on earth avoiding controversy. Yet the church today prefers not to engage, be silent, just to stay in a comfort zone. And maybe we can say a vigil for peace, pray for Gaza, pray for Palestine and Israel, and wish everyone well. The sin of indifference and apathy. So my message to the church today is that this is a Kairos moment. This is a Kairos moment. It's very common in our circles to speak of a Kairos moment. Kairos would mean an appointed time for the purposes of God, an opportune time. It's a time to act. It's a time in which the faithful need to have discernment about the unfolding drama in our world and act prophetically. And I believe this is one of the most profound times for our church, for our world and for our humanity, I believe. And it's a moment that I call the "you are the man or person" moment, coming from a tradition from a story in Hebrew scripture that I would like to share with you in 1 Samuel 12, when Nathan, the prophet, had to confront King David. Some of you know that story. It happened when the prophet Nathan had to confront King David with David's sin of greed, adultery, murder, exploiting the vulnerable, and taking what is not his own. David did all these things. And now Nathan had the task to confront him. To do so, Nathan gave a story with a clear message, which was followed by a strong conclusion. So let me read the story. The Lord sent Nathan to David. Nathan came to him and said to him, and here is the story: there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little lamb that he had bought. The poor man brought it up, the lamb, grew it up with him and with his children. The lamb used to eat of his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom. And it was like a daughter to him. Now one day there came a traveler to the rich man. And the rich man was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. Instead, he took the poor man's lamb, prepared that for the guest who had come to him. That's the story. The Bible says that David was angry when he heard that story. He couldn't fathom the injustice, yet he couldn't see that it was his own. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And then came Nathan's response, which I love, and I'm challenging you with. A response that was so profound, so courageous, and so prophetic, a response that is so much needed today. Nathan looked at David and said, "You are the man. You are the man." This was Nathan's challenge to the empire of his time. It took courage, but he had to speak truth to power. He had to uncover the exploitation of the vulnerable, even if it meant challenging his own king, his own empire. He had to speak truth to power, even if it meant challenging his own empire. I believe this was Nathan's Kairos moment. And what's happening in Gaza today, what's happening in Palestine, is a Kairos moment which demands a similar prophetic courage. This is precisely a you are the person moment. You are the one. This is not a time for diplomacy. Yes, maybe Nathan was smart and wise, but he wasn't diplomatic. He spoke truth to power with very clear morality, with very much moral clarity. And I love how Nathan did not try to rationalize the position of David. He didn't tell us to try to understand David's side of the story, or didn't try to say, well, the rich man had to do it somehow. There was another side of the story, as is accustomed to us Palestinians. People want to hear the other side of the story with us. This was a clear moment. You are the man. A Kairos moment that needed courage, integrity, and morality. And I believe this is precisely what our world needs today, especially in the political world, but also in the church: courage, integrity, and morality. And I say this because over the years, I've spent so much time with church leaders, but also with politicians. Not just in the last 10 months, but before that. And oftentimes, something that I always hear, do you know what? We are with you, but we wish we could say this in public. They say one thing behind closed doors and another in public. So they tell me, we wish we could say this in public. They can say this in public, but they chose not to. Again, because what we need in our world today is courage, integrity, and morality. They can, but they chose not to. It's time to confess the complicity of the Western world and the Western church. It's time to repent and reverse course and make amends. And it's time that we act because of the urgency of the moment. And I would like to suggest that our response to what's happening in our Kairos moment begins by calling things by name. Speak truth to power without any diplomacy, and don't mince your word and don't sugarcoat your words. Speak clearly. Friends, what's happening in Palestine is not a conflict. Please stop talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There is no conflict in Palestine. The problem we are facing is settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid. Call it for what it is. In fact, it's so offensive, I would argue insulting to us Palestinians. When we're going through a genocide or are living under a brutal, oppressive apartheid, and your call to us is to do peace and reconciliation. I don't want to hear about that. I want you to help us end the structure of apartheid and end this genocide right now. Call it for what it is. And friends, it's time to call things by name and address Zionism for what it truly is, and Christian Zionism for what it truly is. There is no middle ground. Zionism is supremacy. Zionism is racism. Zionism has led to colonialism, to ethnic cleansing, to a genocide. This is what Zionism in practice is. And in fact, if you don't believe me, read the nation-state law. Have you read the nation-state law? The nation-state law states, and this is recently passed by the Israeli parliament, the Keynote, the right for self-determination is exclusive to the Jewish people only. If this is not supremacy, what is? I don't know. If this is not apartheid, what is? The current Israeli government that is waging this war of genocide, when it was formed, stated, and I quote, "The land of Israel belongs exclusively to the Jewish people. The Jewish people have an exclusive right to the land of Israel. The Jewish people have an exclusive right." This is what they said. So when we call Zionism as racism and supremacy, we're only repeating what they're telling us and what they're doing on the ground. And by the way, imagine if a Palestinian leader said, Arab Muslims have an exclusive right to the land of Palestine. My goodness, imagine how the world would react. Yet somehow Netanyahu and his crew says this and he's celebrated in the Congress. That's why I say it's time to recognize Zionism and Christian Zionism for what it truly is. And to my Christian siblings, I say, when you consider Zionism for what it is, a system of colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid, can you really put the word Christian before all of that? And for that matter, can you really put, I would argue, the word Jewish before that? And I'm very grateful for the moral clarity of many, many Jewish voices today. And I say moral clarity and sometimes simplicity. Listen to the words of Jewish Voice for Peace, who state that, and I quote, "Jewish Voice for Peace is guided by a vision of justice, equality, and freedom for all people, so we unequivocally oppose Zionism because it is counter to those ideals," end quote. You know what I love about this statement? It's simplicity. It's very direct. We stand for justice, equality, and freedom. Zionism is the opposite of those, so we unequivocally oppose it. Honestly, I wish more Christians have this moral clarity and integrity to say these words about Zionism. So my message to faith leaders in the United States, it is a Kairos time. It is a time to act. Call things by name and then act. And I'm really encouraged to see many Muslims, Jews, and Christians coming together to create new alliances. And I truly believe this is the way forward. We need new ways of doing interfaith in which we are coming together in alliances for justice and not doing the typical let's come together and get to know one another and sing and leave. Together we can. Together we can. And together we can lead and show the world a different way. Let us unite for justice. And in particular, in this context of the United States, here is my call to faith leaders. And I said this, by the way, when the war first started in November, when I was speaking to a group of 100 pastors, mainly evangelicals. And I said the genocide is going to happen. We saw it coming. We saw it coming. And I said, do you know how I know it's happening? For two reasons. First, I know that Israeli leaders know they can do whatever and never be held accountable. And second, they know they don't have to pay for it. So this is my message to you about these two things in particular. Israel is doing what it can, what it's doing when it comes to the occupation, to apartheid, to building settlements, to oppressing Palestinians. You know why? They don't pay the bill. You guys pay the bill. It's your tax money. And if faith leaders are not willing to step up and say, we do not accept that our money be used in apartheid and a genocide, then who will? Who will? If faith leaders do not stand in unison and oppose how the money is being spent, then who will? It's your money that's funding it. So it's time to act given the urgency of the moment. And second, we know too well that Israel would never do what it does if it wasn't for the immunity it enjoys from the United States. And in particular, from the congressmen and women, the policymakers that you elect. So you need to hold those you elect accountable. Israel is committing war crimes. How is it that no one is holding them accountable? So please, be more urgent and be more active when it comes to those you elect in government. Challenge them, speak to them, let them hear your voices, hold them accountable so that they hold Israel accountable. I'm really convinced Israel will not sit on the table and decide what it's going to do, whether share the land in a one state or divide the land in a two state, unless it is forced to. And right now, they have no reason to sit on the table. They're not paying the bill. They're not held accountable for breaking the law. And it's only when the masses on the ground move with unison that this can change. And my hope that it is the faith leaders who lead this. My hope it is the faith leaders that demand answers and create opportunities for change. In December, I said Gaza has become the moral compass of our world. I truly believe this. Gaza has divided our world not on the basis of religion, ethnicity, or nationality, but it has divided the world on ethical basis. We need to know where you stand. We need to know where you stand from the killing of 16,000 children. We need to know where you stand from the apartheid in Palestine. It's basically, to me, it's a very simple choice. You're either with justice or you're with apartheid. There is no middle ground. Friends, there is no middle ground. Stop lecturing us. Stop lecturing us about peace. It's either justice or apartheid, and you have to take a stand. And it's precisely because our collective humanity is at stake. I truly believe Gaza has divided our world, and I see it everywhere I go. And that's a good thing. For if we are okay as a humanity with the killing of children on such level, being watched live for all the world to see, there's something wrong. There's really something wrong with our humanity. And for my Christian siblings, it's precisely the credibility of our Christian witness that is at stake. How can we continue to preach Jesus while being silent about the genocide, especially when it's done with our money? And especially when the Bible is weaponized, our own religious texts, sacred texts are being weaponized to justify and support this genocide. Your silence means your approval. Your silence means you're okay. Your silence means we don't care. That's why I say it's the credibility of our Christian witness that is the stake. The credibility of the gospel witness if the church remains silent. Many times we ask when horrific things happen, where was God? And I've come to learn that the right question to ask is not where was God, but where were the good people? And as a pastor, I must ask, where was the church? If it was a hurricane or an earthquake, I understand that question. But a genocide in which we as humanity are committing, don't blame God. We are to blame. As a faith leader, I say this, and as a Christian pastor, I say, where was the church? The first time I asked this question, and I remember it very well. Many years ago, I visited the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, and please don't, I'm not comparing suffering or context, I'm just telling you my experience. I was visiting the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, accompanied by a friend, Israeli Jewish friend. He explained the story to me through their lens. And I remember in my 20s back then, and in my naivety, and I mean that, in my naivety, the question I kept asking myself the whole time was, where was the church? What did the church do? Where was it? Why didn't it try to stop this? I say in my naivety because later when I left and studied the situation and studied history, I discovered that the church was directly complicit in this. They were involved. And today we ask the same question. Where is the church? Where is the church when it's so much needed to bring comfort, peace to the world? People are suffering and are traumatized. You can't imagine how many people told me in person, we left the church since Gaza began, since the war. Because they come for comfort and find no comfort. Where is the church to speak with moral clarity about justice, about truth? Why isn't the church in the streets where it belongs? The church belongs to the streets. Why isn't the church in the streets where it belongs? And I'm fully aware, and I'm very grateful, and I thank God for the witness of many around the world who are showing us where the church belongs, who are in the streets, whether here or in other cities, those who work the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage. I'm very grateful for the witness of many around the world. But I think we all agree that the church, by and large, was missing. More was needed. Why is it that the university students leading the way and showing the United States and leading with integrity and morality, as if the moral conscience of the country now is with those students? I'm very grateful for the university students, for their courage. They are risking their careers, their lives, their futures for justice and for a better world. They were expelled, they missed graduations, they are facing suitcases. Why? Because they believe in the cause they are fighting for. They believe that they can make our world a better place. And I keep asking, this is my call. Speak to them, encourage them, give them hope, protect them. And by the way, about those university students, a lot of people ask me in this tour, what do you think will happen or should happen? What's best in November, And all I can say is I'm praying for you with the choices you have. But honestly, what will happen in September is far more important than what will happen in November. When those students, the question, and I hope they go back to those university encampments to continue to put pressure so that the voices of the people is heard. This is how change happens, from bottom up, never from top down. And my heart goes for those students who risk everything. And my heart goes for those students who have Palestinian descent, who are broken, they wish they could do something. And they are met with violence, with cases against them, they are arrested, and they're called pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic. And I ask again, where is the church to protect them? Where are the people of faith to protect them? I'm very grateful. Again, there are many who are there. I know this. But we need to be more visible. And we need more. The church is missing. Again, let me remind you, the church belongs to the streets. The church belongs with the marginalized. And it's precisely, and this is something I've learned throughout those last 10 months, a passage that has really guided me, encouraged me, challenged me, is the one in Matthew 25, throughout the last 10 months. When Jesus spoke about the judgment of God. And I think in those days, we need to speak more about the judgment of God. We Christians, by the way, we don't like to talk about the judgment day, right? We're too nice, maybe. Jesus reminds us very often that God is a just God and that there will be judgment. We will all give account. And in Matthew 25, Jesus said in a very direct manner that we will be judged by God based on how we treated the least of these. The least of these being the hungry, the thirsty, the strangers, those without clothes, the prisoners. Let me interpret that: victims of systematic injustice, the marginalized, the oppressed, victims of our systems. This is how God will judge us, based on how we treated the least of these. By the way, not based on our religion or based on our denomination. I hope we take these words by Jesus seriously. And you don't hear me say these things often. I hope we read these passages literally. And it's not only that. Jesus said, how you treat the least of these, and whether we saw his own image, the image of Jesus in the least of these. Jesus said, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. Whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. And this was behind the inspiration of what our church did in December in Christmas. We were so tired, broken, traumatized by the fact that the world back then, and still now, continued to justify and rationalize the killing of our children. It was so heartbreaking. Our response was to see the image of Jesus, to see Jesus in every child pulled from under the rubble. And this is why we created the manger, Jesus under the rubble. This was our response to the indifference of the world, to the dehumanization of the Palestinians, by saying, while you dehumanize us, we see the image of Jesus in every child pulled from under the rubble. They are so precious to God. Jesus is under the rubble was our response to the indifference and apathy of our world, to the logic of power and empire that trespasses on the dignity of people. Jesus is under the rubble is precisely the incarnation message. God becoming one of us in our pain and our suffering. Jesus was born among the occupied. Jesus is under the rubble is God's solidarity with the marginalized, with the oppressed. And our message, and my message is that if God is in solidarity with the marginalized, if God takes sides with the oppressed, this should become in turn our solidarity. We should be in solidarity with the marginalized and the oppressed. If God's solidarity must become our solidarity, it is time for us to rise. It is time for us to act. This is a Kairos moment to the church. So with one voice, may we all say and commit, cease fire now. May justice reign and righteousness fill the world like waters fill the seas. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you, please. Shukran. Thank you.
Dr. Issac has done his job. And now it's time for us to do ours. This is a Kairos moment, and we'd like to give you a few ways in which you can take action. Simple ways, hard ways, a variety of ways. There is something and more than something that you can do. First thing you can do is offer a donation to help cover the expenses of Munther's tour, and baskets will be passed around if you'd like to make a contribution. Fasna said, regardless of the cost, this needs to happen, and now they're trying to figure out how to pay bills. Also, as the baskets come around, if you have a question, please put it in the basket or hand it to one of the ushers. Second way you can take action is throughout Munther's tour, the different congregations and communities in which they've housed him have decided on one very specific action that we want everyone to take, and that is to ask your representative to restore funding of UNRWA. When you leave the church, there are screens with rolling QR codes, and you'll find a QR code to do just that. There are also pieces of paper with links. If you prefer an old-fashioned link that you type in, you will find links to a variety of different actions. In the back, you'll find QR codes. You'll also find tabling materials for ways to take action. Let's make sure that UNRWA is refunded, period. Third way to take action. Dr. Issac said we need to talk about apartheid. Did you hear him say that? If you're looking for a way to begin the conversations or further the conversations, I encourage you to check out apartheid-free.org. There is a pledge that names apartheid and commits to taking action to work to end all support of it. The pledge is very simple. And the pledge is not individual, however, it is communal. And so we encourage you to go back to your communities, go back to your congregations, go back to your city groups, go back to your book groups, go back to your campus groups, go back to your knitting circles, whatever community you are a part of that could take this pledge. There are over 375 different communities who have already taken this pledge. Over 150 of them are faith communities. We encourage you to take this back to your faith community and to all the communities, businesses, unions that you are a part of. More information in the back. I'm going to invite Reverend Yoshi to come up and offer a few more ways to take action.
Thank you, Pastor Munther, for your prophetic words once again from here. And as he shared with us, Gaza is the moral compass of the world. Is there any question which side of the compass we stand on? No. My name is Michael Yoshi. I'm co-chair of the Friends of Wadi Fukin, which is an interfaith partnership with the small village in the Bethlehem district of the West Bank. Pastor Munther didn't talk about the West Bank today, but we see this contiguous issue that all of Palestine is the moral compass of the world today, and that what's going on in the West Bank as well, that's accelerating in terms of the aggression of settler colonialism and the land takeover is of utmost importance for us as well as our attention on Gaza. In fact, as Gaza is being looked at and given the attention, the more there is the aggression in the West Bank. And so what I want to invite you to do, and in fact, Friends of Wadi Fukin is one of the participating organizations in the apartheid-free communities, and there is an apartheid road that is being planned to go through the village of Wadi Fukin. We've been fighting this since 2021. There was a hearing by the Israeli Civil Administration that was held on May 20th. There'll be a second and final hearing held on September the 11th. We're asking people to sign a letter in which we outline the nature of this apartheid road, the inequality of the laws that govern the approval process, and the separation of byways and highways for Palestinians and Israelis there in the West Bank. As this road would serve to expand the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure in the West Bank. And so in the back table next to the T-shirts, we have a flyer there with a QR code. Folks who are online, I think our technician is showing you the slide now. You can take a picture of the QR code, access it, and sign your name on, sign your congregation on, pass it on to other people. Those of you who've already received it, please pass it on to other folks as well. We're particularly looking for more international coverage as well on this. And then as we speak about the village of Wadi Fukin, I want to give a shout out and acknowledgement today for Adam and Nasra. Adam, where are you in the house here? Many of you know Adam, who came here about a year ago and continues to be here speaking around his reality of growing up under the occupation of Israel. And next week on Saturday the 17th, he'll be speaking for a one-year retrospective at the Twin Towers United Methodist Church in Alameda from 3 to 5 o'clock. That's next Saturday, the 17th. We have a flyer in the back that you can get the QR code for the details of that as well. And he'll be joined by Noura Kordi, who's a Palestinian-American resident of Oakland, who just came back from a West Bank trip that she helped organize for accompaniment in several of the West Bank villages. And also Connor Truce, who also went on a trip hosted by Badil in Bethlehem. So they'll be together next Saturday, the 17th at Twin Towers Church from 3 to 5 o'clock. And then finally, I want to call out to what many of us have been working on here in the Bay Area, a new group called BAD is the acronym, stands for Bay Area Divestment. Are there folks from BAD here today that are around? A couple of folks are here. What we're doing is we're taking names on a petition to build up a database for the Bay Area for divestment campaigns in different municipalities and counties in the Bay Area. and you can sign on to that. We're really wanting to reach out to faith communities in particular, to get your congregation members involved, to get your congregations involved, to help be part of the multi-sector efforts in organizing divestment campaigns in the coming weeks. And so there's also some material in the back tables that you can access there to be able to sign on to that, as well as see any of the folks here in the room who can share the QR code on their phone with you. Thank you so much.
Test. This one's working.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Giving us much to think about. We have much to do. I do want to spend a little time answering a few questions. We don't have much time, and I want to respect your time. But talk with us a little bit more. So you're from the West Bank, and all the attention is in Gaza right now. Give us a feel for what it's like living in the West Bank, what it's like as a Christian, in a mostly Muslim community. Talk to us a little bit about the realities of being a Palestinian Christian in the West Bank right now.
Yeah. Is this working? Okay. The only reason I didn't touch on the West Bank is that it's nothing in comparison to what's happening in Gaza. Yet, the situation in the West Bank is so bad. In fact, the year 2023 was the worst in terms of numbers of Palestinians killed in that year. This is before October 7th. And it's not just since the new Israeli government took over in January of 2023. It's not just since that government took over. Maybe I'll use yours or something. Okay. It has always, it's been deteriorating for years in the West Bank. And right now we live in fragmented areas. You have to understand that the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza is only 22% of the total land. And we only control a little portion of that 22%. And Israel over the years have managed to control, build, expand its colonies and military bases within the West Bank, suffocating the Palestinian lives. And then there are the incursions on our communities. Right now, the West Bank has become what some have described like a Swiss cheese. They have taken everything. They've taken the best parts and then suffocated us, pushed us into isolated areas. And since October 7th, the control has become stronger and stronger, to the extent that every isolated block where most Palestinians live, for example, the Bethlehem block, as I call it, all it takes, literally, all it takes is for Israel to close 2 checkpoints, and Bethlehem becomes another Gaza, completely isolated from the world. The same when it comes to Hebron, to Nablus, to Tulkarem. Every Palestinian community is now completely isolated. And I'm talking about the big communities, the cities. It's much worse in the villages. Wadi Fukin is completely surrounded by settlements. I mean, it's literally suffocating the life. There is nowhere to build, to expand. We're not allowed to bring water. We're not allowed, it's an occupation that literally controls every aspect of our lives. And now they're doing more and more incursions, killing people in the West Bank. And again, we're not talking because 5 at a time, 10 at a time. It's not like in Gaza, 100 at a time. But it's happening. And it's becoming dangerous. Yesterday, a friend of mine was attacked leaving from Jericho to Ramallah by settlers in the road between Jericho and Ramallah. It's really becoming dangerous to go from one Palestinian town to the other on those roads, So if the checkpoint is open, and by the way, I'm not even talking about checkpoints that take us to the Israeli side. This is out of the question now. So even traveling between one Palestinian city to the other has become very, very dangerous. Life in the West Bank, as it is right now, is becoming unlivable, with so much risk. And it's truly a testimony to the resilience of Palestinians that we continue to endure and resist in our homeland. Our fear is that things could escalate. And with those settlers being completely unchecked, and I laugh when Americans tell us, well, we revoked the visa of 3 radical settlers. I mean, are you mocking us? Seriously, are you mocking us? So if settlers behave, they can stay? Is this the case? But these settlers are completely unchecked. And if this war doesn't stop and escalates to the West Bank, believe me, it's going to be much, much worse than Gaza. So we live with a sense of anxiety right now, thinking and asking ourselves, will this be our fate? Will this be our fate one day?
And the follow-up question, several folks ask about the Christianity of being a Palestinian Christian. Does that separate you from other Palestinians? What is the in this rhetoric of religious war? How do you relate to other people of faith?
It's not a religious war. Whatever happens to Palestinians happens to us. And really, yes, I am a pastor and I represent my community and I speak for my community, but most of the time you don't hear me talking about Palestinian Christians. I talk about all Palestinians. First, because I'm one of Palestine. We're all one in this. And second, because, and I hope my Christian friends understand this, there is no special category when it comes to the Christians in Palestine. We're not a special category. And more importantly, there is no Christian solution to the problem. In other words, you can't think of how do we help the Christians in Palestine. The only way to help us is to end apartheid and to put an end to this current political oppression we are under. And I say this because many times I meet Christians who want to help us, but they don't want to challenge Israel. It wouldn't work. Believe me, you can't just think that there is a solution to help the Christians only without the rest. And that's mainly the reason why most of the time you don't see me talking about Christians suffer from this or Christians suffer. Our problem is the problem of all Palestinians, namely the occupation and apartheid.
So you chose to be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. Tell us a little bit about that, and I mean, is there potential allyship between Palestinians and American conservatives? What was behind that?
Any platform I have to speak about Palestine, I'll go to. This is my approach. And I was surprised by the invitation, but I immediately thought of the potential, and literally millions watched it, millions commented on it. It was a big controversy. Everybody thought Tucker has betrayed the right, and equally I was attacked. By the way, I was attacked heavily by the Zionist camp after that interview, which signals, I would believe, I would argue, the beginning of the shift among a big segment in the American right. I encourage you to go to Tucker's X feed, to that interview, and scroll through the hundreds of thousands of comments on that interview. You will be surprised. Does it create a new allyship? I think I would only say it signals, as I said, a shift. And I'm beginning to see even evangelicals and conservatives questioning this unconditional support to Israel for different reasons. Maybe not because of concern for justice for the Palestinians, but at least they're beginning to question that. And my final comment, because this is something I keep hearing in this tour, so much resentment to white evangelicals, as I've heard it so many times. And all I want to say is, don't give up. Actually, try to talk to them with kindness, but with truth. Don't mince your words, but be kind. And you will be surprised how many have changed and how many I've seen change over the years. So don't think they are just a hopeless case. We need to continue to speak to people of every kind and try to win as many people as we can for this cause.
So you talk about this moment being a Kairos moment for the world, and really how what's happening in Gaza is revealing of a moral compass. There are so many horrors happening globally. How do you see what is happening in Gaza connected with them, and how do you see the resistance to what is happening with Gaza, potential for a more global resistance in this moment to various forms of oppression?
Yeah, we have to read everything in a connected way. We can't ignore what's happening in Sudan today. Millions are displaced. And in many other contexts, there is so much oppression. And I think behind all of it is, if we look at common factors behind all of it, there is always this human greed, coloniality, which is a way of always seeking power and domination. But also, it's not just the obsession with violence and power, but behind all of that is the weapon industry. Most of it comes from this country. Those wars won't be possible without the weapons. You see me always scrolling on my phone, and the breaking news I read is how the bomb that killed 100 people yesterday is made in America, and they were saying us the details. This is the problem, that there is this industry now that doesn't care for humanity, and they want to sell more. And in some instances, they live on creating more and more conflict. It's human greed. And the only way to challenge it is to unite, connect these struggles, and as I said, intersectionality, interconnectivity. Even as I look in the United States, for example, wherever I go, I see a good presence of African Americans, people of color who understand victimhood. I look at, for example, who led the court case against Israel. It's South Africa. It's a country that understands colonialism, understands apartheid. And weeks or months later, it was Algeria that went to the United Nations to call for the recognition of Palestine as a state. Algeria, another victim of colonialism. So it's those countries who understand that should unite and come together. And the more we listen to voices in the global south, I think the more our world could become. The more we try to undo the mistakes and horrors and evils of colonialism, the more we're able to head in a more correct path as a humanity.
May it be so. So a lot of people want to know about the future, right? You said you could see genocide on the horizon. In this moment, do you foresee an end to the crisis, either the creation of a Palestinian state or a vision for Arabs, Jews, Christians, and Muslims all living together in a democratic post-apartheid state?
If you ask me this question before October 7th, I would say, go read my writings. I've written on sharing the land, living as equals. I've written on equal rights. We had hopes, we had dreams. Honestly, and don't, to the question, I don't want to even consider the question now. Right now, we don't even have hopes. Our hope is to survive. Our hope is for this genocide to end. Our hope is that it doesn't escalate to the West Bank. I can't even begin to think of the question of a one state or two state when we're being massacred. And there is a potential of yet more massacre in the West Bank. And I think it's a question that people love to debate and question, and one state, two state. This is not the time to discuss that. This is the time in which we make our priorities. Our priorities, I believe, should be, first, let's end the genocide. Second, and that's, I mean this should be the priority. And then second, let's end apartheid. Let's bring then Israel to the table. And then we can decide one state, confederate, two states. Honestly, that's not the issue. It's a mean towards living together in the land. But as long as we're not willing to address apartheid, dismantle it, I don't want to hear about one state or two states. Let's get rid of the obstacle, end the genocide, get rid of apartheid, and then, believe me, we'll find ways to share the land together.
Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris is going to be in the Bay Area tomorrow. Several folks are going to be protesting. Those who don't have to be in church at 10 a.m. will be preparing to protest. If you could have her ear for a few minutes, what would you want to say to her? What message do you think might get through?
Well, first of all, let me just address this thing, because I feel there is this perception among many of my American friends that somehow Democrats are better to Palestine than Republicans. And I think this has led to many Democrats taking Palestinians and the Palestinian issue and the Arab community for granted. Let's be honest. I keep pointing to 8 years of Obama, and he had the Congress with him and the Senate with him. What did he do to Palestine? What did Obama do to Palestine? The most liberal, progressive, yes we can, won Nobel Prize. What did he do to us? The $300 billion arm deal to Israel. So please, don't think that if we just elect Democrat, we solve the Palestinian issue. It's much more complicated than that. You need to be more strong in your message and in your demands. I was in the White House in November. We didn't meet with senior officials, but we met with those who are very much involved. And I can share with you what I've said to them. I said, I believe you're committing a genocide. A colleague of mine who was part of that delegation was actually more forward than me. She said, we're here in the White House, but in reality, it's the Red House, because of the blood of Palestinians. So I can't just sit with good faith and say, thank you for, we need to call things for what they are. The current American administration, the current US administration, is directly involved in a genocide, is committing a genocide. Let's call it for what it is. The funding, the political cover, the UN resolutions, the vetoes in the UN against the ceasefire. So I don't want to hear that this is a progressive, and then the compassionate Joe Biden kind of persona that, and I think there's something behind it. He is compassionate, but to those who look like him. Because this is, when we say as Palestinians, this war convinced us that the world does not see us as equal, and that racism is behind a lot of the actions. I'm convinced of this. And so my message to Harris would even go beyond that. For someone who comes from or belongs to the African American community, that knows what segregation and racism is all about, yet somehow do the same thing to the Palestinians, is something I cannot understand. And we need to call them out precisely for that. Because here's the thing is, so many times when people fight empire, you know what the saying goes, if you want to silence a prophet, give him a position. And many times people who are in the tradition of fighting empire, once they become in power, they forget everything. I was with activists yesterday or today, and they said how they were challenging someone in the LA municipality, I forgot, who was fighting the university encampment and sending, to get and he said, ironically, that when he was a student, he did the same thing. And now he's in power. He's the one sending troops or police to get the students out. This is our problem.
Thank you. It is so refreshing to hear truth spoken. The last question I'm going to ask you, in respect for your time, but I thought it might really be a good one to end on. Tell us what inspires and sustains you, and what sustains your faith in the face of genocide, famine, war, and how do you pastor in this moment?
One day at a time, honestly. It's one day at a time. And we Palestinians have managed the art of survival, I would say. Right now, one of the things we talk about all the time in our community and also in churches is the concept of sumud, resilience, resistance. Sumud is as resilience and steadfastness. And it has become part of who we are. I wish I could tell you a magic formula. Here are my 5 points that sustain me. Other than to say it's one day at a time. And honestly, it's faith in God. Faith in the God of justice. And the God who calls us to action. I'm really haunted, honestly, as a person. This is something very personal by the question, what did you do when something was needed? Where were you? And did I do my part? Because many times, we're asked about the effectiveness of what we do, because it's so heartbreaking to continue to do what we're doing for not just the last 10 months, by the way. Those who know me know that I've been doing this for a long time now. Ever since I finished seminary, I've been speaking about this in all different places. And it's really disheartening and demoralizing to see that things are getting worse. And I've been advocating, and many of us, of course, but I don't look at the results as such, but was I faithful? Did I do my best? And I'm really also haunted by that question on, will my generation be the last generation to continue the Christian presence in the Holy Land? And I feel the weight of this historical responsibility on our shoulders. So this is not the time in which to think, about the bigger circle, and just to live one day at a time and to continue to endure. And faith, definitely, faith in God helps. And I'm really, really, and I mean this, I'm really inspired by the resilience, the sumud of the people of Gaza. It's them that we should look to, for example, not myself, a pastor in Bethlehem or in the West Bank right now. I hope it doesn't get worse. They have never stopped their desire to live, and they have never stopped believing in God. I'm still shocked that they still rise from under the rubble and saying, Nushkur Allah or Hasbi Allah, when we commit ourselves to God. So if they have it, we have no reason to stop or to say that, we can't go on anymore. So that's how it.
Have a blessing. As we come to a close, I'd like Reverend Michael Yoshi to offer a blessing on you and your work, on us and our work. Reverend Yoshi.
I've been given the privilege to offer a closing spiritual blessing. As you stood up, let me invite you to stand up again and just stretch a little bit. You've been sitting for a long time. And shake your shoulders and just, you know what you do? Shake out that stuff you don't want in your body. Whatever, the fear, the anxiety, the hopelessness, the despair, the cynicism, get that out of you. And I'm going to invite you, as you're standing, to have your palms facing up. Close your eyes gently. Take a very deep breath. And we know that the breath of God has been with us in the words of our beloved brother, Pastor Munther. We give gratitude for the prophetic words he has shared with us and the challenge that he has given to each and every one of us, to our congregations, to our communities, to this region of the world. I invite us to gently open our eyes to recognize that we are in a space of kairos, that we are in a space of a new awareness and consciousness, that we form beloved community here today. And I want to ask you just to turn around to one another, to see each other, to appreciate one another, so that this community that has been formed today continues to sustain the work that has been done and also to continue the work that will be done. In affirming beloved community, hold that love in our hands, appreciating what that means for each and every one of us, for love trumps everything else. I want to invite us then to dip low, keep hands firm, and motion towards our brother Munther to lift him up with that collective love of the beloved community, to lift him up for the remainder of his trip, for those people that he will continue to speak to share his words with, to be with his family, his children on the journey, and scoop back down and turn around to each other. Let us lift each other up as well, because we do this work together, and we lift each other up in that eternal love so that we can sustain ourselves each day at a time. And taking one final last deep breath to our bellies. Lift up this love to God and let go of it. Give it over. Come back home to our heart, knowing that when we give the love away, love always returns back to us. Love will continue to sustain us. Love will continue to bless us. Love will continue to call us into action this day, the next day, the next day after, and the next day after. Blessings and peace. Amen.